I hope y'all enjoy the Christmas lights I spent some time installing in the background of the set and don't find them too distracting. Just want to throw some holiday spirit up here, right? You know, get the Christmas lights, give a new look to the show while we get through the rest of December. And let's see if I'm actually going to kick these lights down on time. But to the topic of this video, right? Kevin Stefanski and SHEDUER Sanders' relationship has been one of the more sensationalized storylines of the Cleveland Browns season. A lot of people feel a lot of different ways, despite not having a ton of concrete information about what the relationship is between these two, right? Some people seem to think, and this is quite frankly what the mainstream narrative is, that Kevin Stefanski is working against SHEDUER Sanders. Other people, usually folks who kind of have experience in football, especially experience coaching football, seem to think that that is a utter ridiculous notion. And some people kind of sit in between where they don't really know what to think because Kevin Stefanski is so stoic, he's hard to read, and because the situation surrounding SHEDUER Sanders is, quite frankly, a bit awkward to begin with. We're going to have a thorough discussion about this. And look, some of you might not like what I'm going to have to say here. Some of you might like what I have to say. This is a topic where you're not going to please everybody no matter what you say here. So if you don't like what I'm saying, you can at least enjoy the Christmas lights. That's why I installed them. But all seriousness, we're going to talk about that and more. But before I do that, I want to thank my sponsor, Sleeper. Real quick, just want to let you guys know Sleeper has a new offer here. They're offering a free $20 entry, no deposit required. And also, if you're a first-time user, you also will receive a 100% match on up to $100 when you use the promo code WORSTTAKE. Again, $20 free, no deposit required. Plus, first-time users also receive 100% deposit match up to $100. Join Sleeper. So one narrative that seems to not be going away, right, is this sabotage narrative surrounding the Cleveland Browns and SHEDUER Sanders, and Kevin Stefanski specifically seems to be getting the worst of it when it comes to who's being blamed for the sabotage and who is the figurehead of this sabotage. I think that this is a bit unfair to lay it all at the feet of Kevin Stefanski. Kevin Stefanski kind of makes himself a bit of an easier target for conspiracies because he's not going to tell you how he's feeling, right? He's not going to sell anything. So because he doesn't tell you how he's feeling, people kind of just imply how they think he's feeling. But in order to understand why it is that people believe this and why it's credible for some folks to think that Kevin is not a big fan of SHEDUER, we got to go all the way back to the draft, because the main reason why Kevin has become the figurehead for the sabotage narrative around SHEDUER is simply because they drafted Dillon Gabriel before they drafted SHEDUER Sanders. If they don't take Dillon Gabriel in the third round and they just take SHEDUER in the fifth, or they take SHEDUER in the third round, I don't think these narratives exist about specifically Kevin sabotaging SHEDUER. Maybe there's still a sabotage narrative, especially if SHEDUER does go all the way into the fifth round, because you would see the team still kind of prioritize him not playing and trying to give him a redshirt year versus putting him on the field immediately. Maybe a third round pick gets treated a little differently. Like if SHEDUER was drafted in the third, maybe this whole sabotage narrative doesn't even exist because the draft slide doesn't go on for an extra day and it doesn't pick up steam as one of the biggest stories in the country. Who knows? We can live in those what if scenarios, but if I were to diagnose this whole thing and tell you what the root of the issue is, it is because the Cleveland Browns drafted Dillon Gabriel before SHEDUER Sanders. I think that's causing a lot of the issues that the Cleveland Browns are dealing with, because they made the determination, a factual determination, one that you cannot argue, that they felt like Dillon Gabriel was more valuable than Shedeur Sanders in the draft. And that was a determination that a lot of people disagreed with. Even people who weren't fans of Shedeur Sanders disagreed with that diagnosis. It seemed to be only something that some people in the league felt like was a proper diagnosis. But I didn't remember talking to a lot of people in the pre-draft circuit that thought that Dillon Gabriel was a more sought-after prospect than Shedeur, right? It was probably one of the more shocking results in the draft. And if you remember, if you were watching the draft around then, the narratives that exist now that have exploded with Shedeur as he's gotten to play and as he's played well, those narratives started right when the Browns took Dillon Gabriel, right? It just so happens that the Browns swung back and traded for him. And then who gets the credit for drafting Dillon Gabriel? Who seems to be the most behind drafting Dillon Gabriel? Publicly, it was Kevin Stefanski, and privately, I believe that it was Kevin Stefanski who wanted Dillon Gabriel on the team the most, who preferred Dillon Gabriel, right? You have the famous Nathan Zegura quote where he talks about Dillon Gabriel being second on their board as far as quarterbacks were considered, or at least their second favorite option for the value that they have here, right? So Dillon Gabriel, that's why they're dealing with a lot of what they're dealing with right now. They took Dillon Gabriel in the third before Shedeur Sanders. If they did not do that, I don't think that RDC is making a video about Kevin Stefanski right now. I don't think it gets as crazy as it does. That was a miscalculation, a misstep, and a misevaluation. Now, usually in the draft, you're allowed to have a misevaluation, but when one is this high profile regarding the quarterback position, people tend to have long memories. There's nothing new about that. Now, when it comes to the Shedeur Sanders pick, right? Who wanted that pick to happen the most? I think the obvious answer is Andrew Berry. I think Andrew Berry saw Shedeur Sanders sitting there in the fourth round after they took Dylan Sampson and thought to himself, this is a value that I'm not going to pass up, right? We know how Andrew Berry operates. He always likes to have extra value. He's always taking flyers at the quarterback position. He's always seeking value at the quarterback position. Shedeur Sanders is sitting there. I don't know where Shedeur was on their board, but let's imagine he's third or fourth on their board, and they say to themselves, why not, right? Let's go ahead and take Shedeur Sanders. This seems like a straight up and like an Andrew Berry decision 100% for good and bad reasons, right? Like the hallmarks of an Andrew Berry decision are not that they don't or do work out, because Andrew Berry decisions work out a lot. Like he's been a pretty good GM in Cleveland. That might be controversial to say, but I think he's been a good GM. The thing that's the hallmark of an Andrew Berry decision is the utter lack of care about how this is going to affect the public relation aspect of the team, right? Like that is the hallmark of a decision from Andrew Berry. You sign Isaiah Bond right after like he clears court. The Deshaun Watson stuff, bringing him in, whether that's 100% Andrew Berry or not, like it feels like something Andrew Berry would be a part of. Countless other things, right? Quincy Judkins, how they handled that when he had his issues popping up, every other draft pick. Andrew Berry does not consider very often, how is this going to affect PR, right? Like he's pretty callous to that. So the idea of drafting Sanders or not drafting Sanders would be to avoid the PR hit of people being that interested in what is going to be your third string quarterback. I don't think that's something that matters to Andrew Berry. I think Andrew Berry saw value, a flyer he could take at the quarterback position, and decide to go after it. Andrew Berry clearly seems behind it. I know some people think that it was like Jimmy Haslam, but I don't think you draft Dillon Gabriel if Jimmy Haslam is behind this. I think you draft Shedeur Sanders much earlier than the fifth round if Jimmy Haslam's behind this, because he owns the team. Why in the world, if he wants the team to do something, would he wait until the fifth round to do it? that would be an unreasonable amount of discipline to expect from Jimmy Haslam. I promise you, if Jimmy wanted to draft the quarterback, we would have taken SHEDUER like number 2 overall or something crazy like that. We wouldn't have waited 3 days in the draft to go after SHEDUER or risk 3 days in the draft to go after SHEDUER. So I think it was a Andrew Berry decision. Now, that's where a lot of people are, right? Andrew wanted SHEDUER. Kevin did not want SHEDUER. Kevin wanted Dylan. Now, if you leave it at that, you can see how you can get to kind of the narratives that you are at. But I need people to kind of understand and look into their own lives for why that is kind of an unfair place to leave things. Very often in life, you have to deal with something that maybe you didn't choose to deal with. You get saddled with a partner in a lab if you're still in school, right? Or you're in college, or maybe in a group project that you didn't necessarily want. Or maybe your parents make you hang out with your cousin that you don't really know that well more than you want to, or whatever, right? Like you get stuck in a situation with people that you don't necessarily, like, you didn't choose to be in those spots. But very often you find common ground with these folks and you have your own unique and special relationship that you develop over time. Basically, what I'm saying is assuming that the relationship is still where that relationship began with SHEDUER and Kevin is unfair and unlike how humans interact in these kind of situations, especially when you consider everything we've heard from players who are on the team about this, right? You have Alex Wright talking about how Kevin Stefanski and SHEDUER are always talking to each other, always speaking to each other, always in the office, learning, going over tape with each other. You have SHEDUER himself talking about his relationship with Kevin. You have Kevin talking about the extra work he's put in with SHEDUER. I think it's entirely possible, and reach into your own life to understand this, if you are old enough, that it's true that Kevin did not choose for SHEDUER to be here. Andrew did. But that doesn't mean that Kevin is incapable of having a good relationship with SHEDUER. Did he want Dylan to take the job first? Yes, because Dylan was his first choice. But once Dylan did not work, but that didn't mean, or that doesn't mean that he ignored SHEDUER on the way up. It seems like that wasn't the case. They did the hungry dogs thing to give SHEDUER extra reps. They implemented ways for SHEDUER to get FaceTime while he's the third string quarterback, which is not common in an NFL dynamic at all, right? To get FaceTime with the head guy when you were the third string quarterback, but they found ways for SHEDUER to get FaceTime with Kevin. Kevin was working with SHEDUER when he was on that far practice field, when he was doing scout team reps, right? I have that confirmed by people who were there in the building, right? Like, it wasn't like just because he preferred Dylan, he ignored SHEDUER entirely. And honestly, you could tell that's the case when you watch SHEDUER Sanders on the field, because the SHEDUER Sanders you're seeing is a much improved version of SHEDUER from what he showed on tape from Colorado, especially from the fundamental things you would expect a coach to help him to work on. So the evidence on the field tells you that the coaching staff has poured a great bit of work into SHEDUER Sanders. How Kevin did not want to rush SHEDUER on the field tells you that there was a great amount of care shown for when SHEDUER plays and when he doesn't, and putting him in a situation to succeed. The amount of care that they've shown in the game plans with SHEDUER's out there, the amount of care that they've shown him during the season, right? Like, I know people want to look at this through a lens of SHEDUER's being set up to fail, but SHEDUER is succeeding because the people around him are also helping him succeed, and SHEDUER is doing the work that he needed to do to succeed. It's not just SHEDUER. It's not just the coaching staff. It is a group effort here. Now, whether that will be recognized at the end of the season, whether this keeps Kevin his job, those are conversations for a different day. I understand Kevin's a tough person to read because he doesn't really give you much, but as somebody who has sat here and analyze Kevin Stefanski more accurately than not over the last 5 years, you can kind of tell from his press conference clips that he's more complimentary of SHEDUER than he's been of other quarterbacks who have had success under him, right? Like, you go back and look at his press conferences with Joe Flacco when he's having success, with Baker Mayfield when he's having success, with Jameis having success, and then the same thing could be said with SHEDUER. He's never going to be effusive with praise. This is not how he goes. He's more of a Bill Belichick type, but he's been pretty praiseworthy of the work ethic of SHEDUER Sanders, right? Like, he doesn't really shy away from it, or really felt the need to tone down his praise of what he feel like SHEDUER has done behind the scenes. It almost comes off as if Kevin, has been proven wrong by SHEDUER and is happy that SHEDUER was able to prove him wrong. Again, I don't think Kevin went into this a big SHEDUER guy. I don't know if he had anything against him. I think if he had anything against him, they wouldn't have drafted him. But I think he, might have had his concerns with SHEDUER coming into this, and SHEDUER has done a lot to alleviate those concerns. But since they drafted Dillon Gabriel, since there is that initial perception by most people that the Browns didn't even want SHEDUER despite drafting him, they're not going to get the benefit of the doubt when weird things happen on the field, like they take him off the field and Quincy Judkins forgets to toss the ball on a play where SHEDUER probably should have just been on the field to begin with, right? People will make that about Kevin Stefanski, but in all honesty, that was a Tommy Rees play call, right? And nobody thinks Tommy Rees has anything against SHEDUER. But it's interesting when something goes bad there, people default to it was Kevin's fault when Kevin gave up the play calling a long time ago this season. Nothing to me points to a overt example of Kevin not being supportive of SHEDUER while he's here. Is Kevin the right guy long-term for SHEDUER? That's a whole nother conversation to have. But is Kevin working against SHEDUER? I don't think the answer is yes there. I think the answer is Kevin is working his hardest to help SHEDUER like he would help any other player on this roster that he felt like could help the team. I think he's a professional. But I just wanted to throw my 2 cents in there, right? Because I think everybody's having this conversation and it's without the nuance, right? Some people are saying people are ridiculous for thinking that Kevin would do this to SHEDUER. And I get why they feel that way, right? Because they know how coaching works and they know that that's not how it goes. But not really acknowledging why it is that people would feel that way. And I think the selection of Dillon Gabriel has a lot to do with it. And I also think that there's a lot of people who think Kevin is trying to sabotage him, who aren't thinking about the fact that clearly SHEDUER is developing and his coaches have to be a part of that at some way. And if you think Kevin's not involved in the development of SHEDUER, I think that's just willful ignorance at this point to just not give somebody you don't want to give credit. I think Kevin's involved in the development with SHEDUER. I think Kevin's put a lot of work in here. No, SHEDUER wasn't his first choice, but that doesn't mean Kevin Stefanski is not a professional. And you can accuse Kevin of being a lot of things: a bad play caller at times, somebody who's been stuck in the past with his game plans, and some of those things might get him fired at the end of the season. I don't think there's any argument there. But the one thing I don't feel comfortable accusing Kevin of being is unprofessional, because he's never demonstrated that he's unprofessional throughout his entire career. He's demonstrated the opposite, that he is extremely professional, and not going to hold a personal vendetta versus a player because he didn't make the express decision to bring them in. That's my 2 cents. Take it for what it's worth. But y'all have a great day. Have a better night. Peace.